So you want to know about LARP? Well, you've come to the right place. Now this video is intended to be an introduction to the hobby, essentially breaking down what LARP is, where you can find the hobby if you don't already know too much about it, and top 5 tips that you probably should remember when you're just first starting out. And it's probably good to remember them even if you do LARP as a hobby. So what is LARP? So LARP stands for Live Action Roleplay, a mix between a video game and immersive theatre. So it's a video game in that you make and create a character in which has stats, number of hit points, it has a background, it has in some cases a species type. It's also immersive theatre in that you enter a world in which there is no script and you act and speak as your character. You essentially improvise everything. LARP is a place where it is a collective story building exercise, a collective storytelling hobby, in which everybody is immersed within the same world as their particular character, interacting with each other, making up stories, making up plot, character links as you go. Now LARP has roots sort of all over the place. It's established within the UK for a large number of years, and similarly within the US. There's Nordic LARP, there's a whole bunch of other stuff which I won't bother getting into too much detail about because I could be here for hours. But in some respects, LARP has its roots, if I put my little Renaissance nerd hat on for a second, it has its roots in something called commedia dell'arte, which is Italian comedy, usually around came about in the 16th century. Improvised theatre and improvisation within this particular thing was you acted on stock characters and a plot outline, and you'd just base what you were doing off of that. So in some respects you can see the similarities between LARP and theatre in that respect. So what kinds of LARP are there? Well, there are a number. For a start, if you think of LARP, the first thing that comes to your mind is a bunch of people hitting each other with swords, fake swords, in a field, and you would be right to some extent, but LARP is so much wider than that. It has many different types, many different settings, many different rule types within LARP as a hobby. There are lots of different types. There could be a zombie LARP, sci-fi LARP, post-apocalyptic, modern day detective things, futuristic stuff, so like a weird dystopian, like we're living in a future dystopia right now. I'm gonna get onto that. You could do like a historical LARP, you could do something based off books, literally anything you can think of you could probably run as a LARP, or has probably existed or will exist if it doesn't already do so now. I would say that there are roughly 3 main types of LARP if you are looking to start it as a hobby. Now your first one is going to be festival LARP, or fest LARP for short. That's usually one which takes place over a weekend, usually in a field. You've got about maybe 1,000 to 2,000 plus people. Essentially it's festival LARP for a reason. There are loads and loads of different people in one place at one particular time. So off the top of my head, there's quite a number of those within the UK that operate on a yearly basis, maybe around 4 times a year. There's some in Canada and the US that are similar. This is one that is basically high immersion, so many people in one place at one particular time, and yeah, that's your festival LARP. Now your second type of LARP would be something that I would possibly call a series LARP. It is usually a middle-sized game, usually anywhere between 30 to 100 or so plus people, not as big as your festival LARP, but this is usually one that would run maybe a couple of times a year, but it would be over a longer series, so there would be a longer plot or a interconnected series of games that is set within one wider world. Now usually these are the ones that are I would say your most common, and they possibly run for maybe like 2-3 years at a time, and then they stop when the system or the setting or the plot stops. Your third kind would be your one-shot LARPs, which I think in some ways are the easiest to get into because they only run once and it's a one-off game and it will never happen again. Until it does, it's much like films with sequels. You only think there's going to be one and then they're like, actually we could make another one or run it again. As a general rule of thumb, LARPs tend to run over a weekend or a day. Sometimes they can be a little bit longer, sometimes they can be shorter, like so a day or a 24-hour time in LARP. that's usually a one-shot. Mostly the ones I've heard about are survival horror. I never do those because I'm scared of literally everything. You are essentially your character for 24 hours and you sleep and eat and dress and brush your teeth and do all those things in character. Also, I should mention that within LARPs, when I discuss types of LARP, I also mean rules. There are rules heavy LARP and there are rules light LARP, and it's all sorts of in between. It's a sliding scale, and to be honest, turn up to whichever one you most find your fun in. Rules are there within LARP to essentially give structure and more kind of grounding to the game, to show that possibly like your actions have consequences, sort of like a video game. I'll probably be doing a separate video on this, but rules are there to sort of give the LARP and give the immersive improvised theatre a little bit more of a backbone in line with the setting. You can't just go off and do literally anything. There has to be limits within the game world. So another question that I got asked a lot, and I think that would be useful to people to know, is how do you find the hobby? Arguably the best way to get involved is usually to look online for websites where they have lists of, I'll put a few in the link below. You can look at lots of different types of LARP and all the different systems that are running and find out sort of what you would find most fun. They usually link to websites or Facebook pages or social media pages just generally, in which you can check it out in more detail. So if you're just starting out, what do you need to know? What are the 5 most crucial things or important things that would be useful to take forward going into this hobby? Well, the first thing is that you're gonna feel, or you might feel, a little bit silly getting involved and pretending to go off and be a knight, or pretending to go and be a doctor, or just playing pretend essentially. I won't say try not to worry, but everybody gets like that, and if you just realise that it's just a fun, slightly silly hobby that looks a bit weird on the outside, but it is so worth the payoff when you're in a field or you're in a room and you've got so many other people all getting involved in the same type of plot and immersive behaviour, and it's just so good. Like, there's nothing better in some cases than being on a huge field surrounded by tons of people and you're all like screaming at this barbarian line or something, or you're all having a really intense discussion around a table about sort of the merits and failures of a particular plot item that's come up, and it's just so good. The buy-in from people is so believable and brilliant. And so if you do feel a little bit silly, don't worry, everyone kind of feels like that just generally throughout the game as a whole, but it's fine, and you will feel silly, but it's fun and it's funny at times as well. Now secondly, and I know a lot of people, this can come with hobbies as a whole, do not worry about the fact that your character or your kit is not good enough. Especially if you're trying LARP out for the first time or the first few times, your character and your kit will come with time. If you are potentially worried about the cost and saying, oh, my character isn't good enough, I need more stuff, or I need an armor rig to feel like I'm truly getting into character, don't worry too much about that. LARP can also be done on a budget, which I'll get into in another video, and I'm going to do quite a few videos on like costume and character as well, and how you develop that. Thirdly, now I suppose this is linked to characters creation specifically, and I know I mentioned the rules and the settings earlier, is when you first start, you don't need to know everything going in. It is, you know, we are not human encyclopedias, we don't know everything, and it is exactly the same for your character. You don't need to go in knowing the rules back to front and the setting inside out, and you know, the name of this person's cousin that was on the plot sheet somewhere. It is entirely legit for you to go in and possibly just know your name, your background, and possibly a couple of your mates, and maybe like the place where you've come from, or the village or the town that you've lived in. Unless you are playing a character like that, in which case you probably should learn a lot of stuff, but that's not the point. Also with rules about knowing everything, is that is also why you have refs there as well during the game, who sort of monitor and check that people are following the rules and are there to ask questions of as sort of the game progresses. Is they are there to be asked questions. They are there to help you in play. It is not just somebody who exists outside of play, they're somebody to help you as you go. So if you do forget the rules, if you do forget sort of bits of the setting that you probably should know, you can go and ask them questions as well, and they can either check on documents for you or they can tell you. The amount of times I've been in a fight and I've forgotten what the rules are numerous. Usually I just fall over and start dying if I forget and I've been hit too many times, but it's fine for you to forget things, you don't need to know everything. A fourth useful thing I would say is, especially if you don't really know anybody or just generally going into a game, is make character links. Now it could literally be just one person that you know and that your character would know going into this game, but it super helps, I have found, to alleviate possible nerves or worries about going in. Now the fifth one is something that I would personally say is very important, especially as a new player. Remember to take breaks as you go. Unless it is a 24-hour time in, but there are always usually spaces reserved for people to take breaks during the game. That's usually an out of character area in which individuals can go and sit down and just chill out for a little bit, maybe get a cup of tea or get some water and maybe just chat to people about the game, especially if you're nervous for the first time or first few times. Just remember that LARP, as whilst it is an amazing, immersive, brilliant hobby, and it can run quite high emotions at times and there can be quite a lot going on and it can be quite overwhelming to an extent, there is always time and space for you to take a break wherever you go, whether that's just to go off to the side and drop character, whether that's just a kitchen space to just chill out for a bit because you're really tired. And that's I think one of the most useful things going into a game as a new person, is that you do not need to be switched on and involved all the time. I know it is tempting because there is possibly like a fear of missing out, or there is a worry that if you're not in there all the time, you're not doing it properly, and there's so many things you could be doing. And actually it's useful to take a break, because when you sort of sit back and look at what's going on, then you can sort of cherry pick what you do as well, and you have a lot more control over, you know, how much you push yourself. The world will continue without you for a little bit, and you don't need to be there all the time. So yeah, those are my 5 or so points about LARP and what you need to know about it, sort of a 101. So I hope you found this useful. There are lots of other things and lots of things I've touched on within this particular video that I want to go and speak about later. If you have any suggestions of what you'd like to see, questions you've always had, I'll be happy to answer them and make another video or just endeavour to answer them. Yeah, hopefully you found this useful, and I hope to create more content for you guys soon.